There are several young people whom have been declared missing for years, and sadly, they will never be found. For these people, their disappearances are somewhat mysterious, and for some of them, they saw it coming, they just didn't know when or how it was going to happen. I belong to that category, and if not for the mercy of God, I would have been among those who would never be found, and perhaps whose story would never be heard. The story you're about to hear is a true story. Actually, it was my story. And I am sure it is also the story of several young ladies out there. My name is Jennifer, and I am a hookup girl. How I became a hookup girl is similar to how several girls who are into hookup started. I had just finished school and there wasn't any job coming along. My parents believed that they had spent enough by sending me to school. By now, they should be eating the fruit of their labor. I remember one occasion that my father called me and asked me what I was doing with my life. He explained that several of my mates are now working in big companies and sending money home to their parents. He even cited that Amaka, his friend's daughter, was already building a house for her father. After that call, I almost fell into depression. On another occasion, my mother called me and demanded that I send her 20,000 naira by all means, that my younger brother has been sent home from school. I didn't have the money, and when I explained it, my mother mentioned that I was a wasted investment. It's not like I haven't made efforts to get jobs. I have. They just weren't coming along. Some of the people who wanted to help me were obviously thinking of having me in their beds. I wasn't about to sell myself out just like that. The more I tried to make effort, the more frustrations were coming from my parents and siblings. I knew I had to do something at all costs to redeem my dignity. One day, I was returning to my tiny apartment from job hunting when I heard someone calling my name. I stopped and looked back, and behold, the person calling and running after me was Amaka. The same Amaka that my father had compared me with for several months. Was Amaka a bad person? Absolutely not. We just haven't been in talking terms like that. But we occasionally get in touch. Now, as I look at her, she looked very wealthy and classic. Her skin was even glowing like that of a newly born baby. Her accent has even changed. "Jennifer, how have you been?" I told her I have been fine. And after a few minutes of exchanging pleasantries, she said she had to go. That she saw me from her car, and even though she wasn't sure it was me, she had to quickly park, run after me while calling my name to be sure. She asked me to call her sometime, that she would be able to get me a job. That day, I was excited. If she had started building a house for her parents, as my father has made me understand, then she would be able to help me. I did call her the following day, and she asked me to meet up with her. I met her in her house. It was a big mansion, and though she didn't live there alone, she seemed to have a big stake in the house. The other ladies living in the house too looked classic. After having a long conversation with Amaka, she told me how she too suffered looking for a job, and eventually, somehow, God made a way for her. I asked her what she does, and instead of telling me, She said she would show me and possibly introduce me to some of her clients. I became eager to want to know what she does for a living. After a few hours, I began to suspect that she was into hookup. Some of the ladies living with her in the house started behaving in a way that I wasn't comfortable with. So I demanded from Amaka to tell me what she does before she would introduce me to any of her clients. After much persuasion, she opened up to me that she was into hookup. According to her, a girl has to do whatever it takes to survive. When I got home that day, I wanted to call my parents and break the news to them that the same Amaka they were proud of was actually a hookup girl. I thought about how my parents would react to it. Would they condemn her and ask me to stay clear of her? After much consideration, I picked up my phone and called my mother. When I told her, her response surprised me. She said even though Amaka was doing hookup, she was after all able to take care of her parents. She went on to say that me that is not even doing hookup, of what help has that been to me? I regretted that moment. I saw the following morning, I made up my mind. I was going to join Amaka. And that was how I became a hookup girl. The first few weeks were tough, but Amaka guided me through. She introduced me to some rich men whom splashed me with more money than I had ever seen in my entire life. The moment I started sending money home to my parents, I suddenly became their beloved daughter. My mother would constantly shower praises on me. I even heard that my father had been parading the area, proclaiming that his daughter is now a big woman in the city. I felt that since I have gotten the approval of my parents, perhaps I have found my purpose. This was the life I lived for more than 2 years. In those 2 years, I have served more men than I can remember. Some of my favorites are the ones that call themselves Yahoo Boys. They squander money as though they fetch it from a well. Any amount I charge them, they don't even negotiate. I know that some of them are fetish, and I constantly pray not to come across those ones. I remember that Amaka mentioned to me that she met one new Yahoo boy like that. She mentioned that the guy was planning to take her overseas, and we were all happy for her. One day, Amaka just suddenly disappeared from the house. It was weird because Amaka wasn't someone who goes out for days without saying where she is going. Some of the girls complained that she has secretly japa, but I knew she hadn't. I would have known if her trip was due. Till today, Amaka has not been found. When I mentioned it to my parents with concern, my mother told me that she had most likely traveled abroad as most people suspected. I asked if her parents had still heard from her, and my parents couldn't provide any tangible response. My suspicion was that her Yahoo boy had kidnapped her. I didn't know the man in question, and there was little I could do. Few months later, I too came across a Yahoo boy. I was at a party and noticed how he was spending money lavishly. He was just throwing money into the air. Later that night, he approached me and asked if he could take me home. I told him it would cost him millions, and he said he doesn't mind. That night, my instinct told me not to go with him, but my mind was already on the money. His car was very fancy. His house was far, too far for my liking. It took over an hour before we got there, and the house was in the middle of nowhere. I started asking him several questions, and he just smiled and told me to relax, that I would be fine, and by the following morning, I would be returning home with millions in my account. That calmed me down. The house was exotic, and it looked like a castle. I asked him if he lived alone, and he said he had 2 guards, a cook, and a house help. I asked why he didn't have a wife. He smiled and said maybe I would end up becoming his wife. The atmosphere relieved a little, and we entered. We headed straight to his bedroom, which looked more exotic. He told me to relax. Some minutes later, someone knocked, and when I opened, I saw that the cook had prepared food for me. It was jollof rice and chicken with a bottle of expensive wine. For some reasons, I didn't drink the wine. The moment I finished eating, he came in and asked me if I had eaten. I told him yes. He asked if they gave me wine. I told him yes. He asked if I had drank it, and I told him yes. He nodded in a content manner and said he would be back, that I should relax. I started to suspect him again. Why would he bring me all the way here and abandon me in his room? I wanted to make a call and send someone my location, but there was no network. That was when I started becoming very worried. Why would someone as rich as this build his house in such remote area? I lay on the bed for over an hour before I heard footsteps of someone coming. I quickly pretended that I was fast asleep. He came in, stared at me for a long while, and gently went back outside. I knew something was going on, so I quietly tiptoed and stepped out too. There were so many doors in the house, and I was just walking aimlessly. I knew that if I got caught like that, I was finished. But then, I also knew that I had to take my chance instead of just surrendering to fate. I started hearing people speaking quietly. So I gently walked to the door and peeped. I saw men standing. One was the Yahoo Boy who had brought me to the house. The second person was one of the guards. And the third person was a strange person I hadn't seen before. A table was in the room, and on top of the table was meat that had been cut into pieces. I started wondering whether they were planning a party. I started feeling uncomfortable, and then I heard something that sent a chill down my spine. The Yahoo Boy asked his guard if he added enough into my drink, and the guard responded that he did. He added that I wouldn't be awake anytime soon. That was when I knew that they had drugged the wine they brought for me. Quickly, I returned to the room, picked my phone, and started looking for my way out. In the process, I burst to the backyard, where I saw the most terrifying things. I saw bones, human bones, several female clothes scattered on the floor, and starch of Naira bills. I started retracing my steps and somehow found my way to the main gate. I thought I was safe, and then I saw the gate man staring at me. I knew that if I would leave the house, then I would have to fight my way out. I was still thinking of how to engage the gate man in a combat when surprisingly, he opened the gate wide and signaled for me to run as fast as I could. I knew then that God still has a plan for me. The gate man told me that I was the first of several girls who had entered the house and found her way out. And since I could find my way out, his conscience would not allow him miss my freedom. That was how I escaped that night. I recalled of all the female clothes I saw at the backyard of the house. Those were clothes of girls who had been slaughtered. In fact, it makes a lot of sense to me now. The meat I saw on the table of the inner room wasn't meat of animal, but of a young girl. Whatever they do with it, only God knows. Some of those girls have been declared missing, and they would never be found. Only God knows if this was the exact place that Amaka too ended up. I am no longer a hookup girl, and I am certain that men like that are somewhere on the streets looking for innocent girls to use for their evil acts. The world is becoming extremely dangerous. And if you are into hookup, serving several random men, you are an easy target for something sinister. This is my story. I hope it helps someone out there.